Hello, my name is David Johnson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Decooda. Decooda is a software company focused on the customer experience industry. And our claim to fame is that we identify the what and why behind customer behaviors, and we do that by analyzing customer feedback across several channels where we're able to identify the customer's emotions, their state of mind, the topics that they're discussing, as well as a wide array of what we call cognitive states. We look at all that data in combination, and we're able to identify the context of the conversation and really what moves the needle and why at a very granular level. This ultimately makes the data very actionable. We've had conversations with executives over the last several months, and there seems to be a lot of confusion in the industry related to technologies and methodologies related to customer experience. So we created what we call the Decooda Executive Briefing Series, and it's really intended to be a primer for executives to help them understand why they're seeing some of the things that they see that are presented to them in meetings or through email and things like that. And so our goal is to kind of elevate the level of knowledge so that executives understand, what it is that they're looking at and why they're seeing the things that they see. Today I'm going to talk about the value of emotion-based insights. And this is very near and dear to our heart because we believe that emotions are the greatest leading indicator to the next behavior of customers. So I want to start by looking at an article that Jane Bliss wrote recently, and I'm just going to basically look at one caption here, which is customer experience actually fell from 2016 to 2017. Twice as many brand scores fell as rose, and losses outpaced gains. This is in the face of significant investments in CX technology. And there's a high degree of frustration in the marketplace as a result of that. In fact, Gartner created something called the hype curve or the hype cycle. And what they basically did is they mapped out technologies that's introduced into the marketplace or concepts. And so here there's this run up to how these technologies and capabilities are going to transform the world. There's a lot of euphoria when it hits here. And then what happens right around here is that the world starts to realize that the claims don't meet the reality. And that's really kind of where we are today as it relates to voice of customer. Customers are looking at the investments that they've made and they're saying, you know what? We don't really know anything different than we knew before. And that frustration is causing them to kind of look around and say, what do we need to do next? And so that's why we created these videos to help people kind of understand what's happening here. Clearly, we think this is where we are. And the question is, how do we take what we know here and evolve quickly so that we can begin to create value for our organizations? So Decooda is different, and Decooda focuses on different things. Decooda doesn't just look at solving these problems from an engineering perspective like many companies. We really consider ourselves to be an interdisciplinary data science company. So while we have a very strong engineering team and we have the most robust platform in the world, we also have infused cognitive science into our process. We've infused corpus linguistics, so people actually understand language, into the process, as well as a number of other sciences. That interdisciplinary team is the team that develops our capability to produce the insights that allow us to understand the context of a conversation so you can take action with confidence. And so Decooda beats CX with a simple stick, not to just make it different, but really to make it better for you, your employees, and customers. And our belief all along has been that, if we're really going to make change, and we do believe that people want to make change, but you need to give them a reason. You need to provide them with evidence that they can believe in that inspires them to lean in to becoming more focused on customers and becoming a customer advocate within the organization. Too many times executives have to resort to coercion or other techniques to get people on board. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just get people to look at the empirical evidence and go, oh my gosh, I never knew it was this big of a problem. We really need to address it. Well, that's the kind of thing that we can do by delivering this level of empirical evidence where we've quantified the things that we look at so people can look at it and go, yeah, I guess it is pretty important for us to focus on. So our approach is very simple. We capture information in a very contemporary and simple way. We ask people questions in a conversational manner. It goes into our cognitive insights engine where we do all the heavy lifting to present and interpret the insights so that you can act with confidence. It is really that simple. So let's talk a little bit about the types of questions that we ask. In some cases, we'll ask two questions. And one might be, how likely are you to recommend this mobile carrier to others for the products and or services you use? Typical Net Promoter Score question, right? Scale of 0 to 10, 0 through 6 are detractors, 7s and 8s are passives, 9s and 10s are promoters. Basic stuff, right? But as you know, that's not really actionable. How we make it actionable is by appending that with what we call an imaginative question. An imaginative question is, tell us about your most recent experience and tell us as if you were telling a good friend. Try to capture all the important aspects of your experience, both good and bad, and describe why you would or would not recommend this product or this mobile carrier to somebody else, right? So when we ask questions in this way, we capture far greater information. And let me just give you an example. We've done a number of studies, and this is just a simplified view of it. But when we compare the way that we ask our imaginative question to traditional open-ended survey questions, we end up with far greater emotions, far greater sentiment detection, far greater cognitive state detection, and far greater attribute detection. And all this is very, very valuable as it relates to us delivering an insight that becomes actionable for you. So the key to why is this thing called an impact analysis. And an impact analysis allows us to distinguish between what people talk about a lot versus what's important. And we've had conversations with several executives, and there's one that I quite often refer to that said, it appears that the more data we get, the dumber we are. And I think what they were basically saying is we get lost in the volumes of data. When everything's discussed a lot, how do you decide what you're going to go focus on, right? That's a really hard problem to go solve, right? So let me give you an example. This is a complaints analysis. And these are topics that have been de-identified to protect the innocent, but A through J would have been topics related to a particular product. And if you saw this as an executive and somebody would come to you and say, look, there are the things that people are talking about that they're complaining about, what should we go fix? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. You would say, well, considering people are talking about A, B, C, and D substantially more than E through J, let's go focus on A, B, C, and D. But that may not be the thing you want to do. The question is, how do you take the analysis to the next level to parse out the things that are actually important versus unimportant? And we do that with something called an impact analysis. With an impact analysis, we look at each topic and then we leverage the other things that we see in data to assign weights back to that topic through an AI-based algorithm. Not going to get into the details of that, but fundamentally what we're able to do is we're able to look at a topic from an emotion and from an impact perspective by assigning what emotions happen with this particular topic. What persona changes did we see happen related to this particular topic? When we look at the overall experience, when the person talked about the experience, did they say the needs were met or unmet? Did they say they trusted the company or didn't trust the company? Did they say that the product or service was worth the money versus not worth the money? And where were they in the purchase path, right? So all that information becomes very valuable when it's assigned to the topic. And then when we do that, we basically look at the topics through a 2x2. One dimension is low impact topics versus high impact topics, and then low frequency conversations and topics versus high frequency conversations and topics. When we do this analysis, what is revealed is that D and B should be our priorities, followed by G, E, and F. And we may or may not even want to focus on C or A because while people are talking about them a lot, they're not important, right? And so this is really valuable as an executive when you're trying to distinguish, well, where am I going to place my bets on improving customer experience? This is the type of thing that become very valuable to you. So, but we don't stop there because that evidence is really valuable. Now imagine going in to somebody with what I had just shown you and saying, look, these are the things that are moving the needle. That's going to inspire a higher degree of confidence among your operational teams. But now there's this whole dimension around organizational ability to execute and greater validation on the things that are happening from a customer perspective. And what we've done inside our application is we've implemented a collaboration function where as you're looking at data and things are happening in our dashboards and in our system, everything that happens goes through an auditing, compliance, and governance process. So if you see something and you drive a collaboration, we track everything associated with it. Who was involved, how long they were involved, what their contribution was to the overall process. We can assign a cost to it or a burden rate so we can actually determine the cost of that conversation. And this becomes really valuable. It's where you're going to identify perhaps outlier situations that cost a lot more than you ever thought that they cost. And we'll be able to present that to you automatically because essentially what we've done is we're creating an organizational memory as it relates to how the company is reacting to data inside the company. The second thing that we do is we have an embedded case management system. And that's where you can say, if customers are angry and they're talking about this particular topic, it needs to go to this group that then addresses these client situations. They can use our platform, and in that conversation with those customers, again, we track everything. So we know how long the case has been open, what the individual steps were, who was specifically involved. If we assign a burden rate to it, we can identify the cost. And at the end of the process, I can tell you, for people that are angry talking about a particular topic, what was the average time it took to close that particular issue? What was the longest lead time item of all the things that happened in that process? And this gives you, again, real empirical evidence that can be presented back into the organization to basically demonstrate to people, look, these are the real issues. These were not interpreted by anybody. It's pure fact. It is what it is. And so we use all of this information then to ultimately drive the development of the agenda for both executive leaders and operational leaders, so everybody's on the same page. Our belief is that if we give the organization evidence, it'll make it easier to motivate people to become customer focused. It will require less coercion and arm twisting to get people behind what it is that we want to do. Based upon the information that we provide, it'll be easier to draw a case for alignment back to corporate initiatives that have been predefined. So all this becomes extremely valuable. Our perception is that this base case of evidence is the starting point that's required for customer experience. Too often we're getting abstracted views or data that's not actionable, and we're swimming around looking for answers. It's like bobbers in an ocean. We just don't know which direction the current's going to take us. In our world, where we deliver this level of empirical evidence, everything's quantified. You know exactly where you need to go, and the evidence is there to prove it. So what does it mean to you as an executive? What does it mean to the rest of the organization? Well, we're going to provide you evidence that allows you to get buy-in from people and draw this alignment and get people to lean in, right? This type of data can be used to reinforce the vision, right, of what it is that you're doing. It's going to be easier to align this to your operational plan. It'll give you direction for focus, right? Where should we go target our efforts? People get frustrated by basically, going back to the ABCD, investing in all of them and not knowing why, it didn't improve the overall customer experience. So we're going to be able to deliver that in terms of our ability to help you focus. We foster repeatability in what we're doing because we have this evidence-based approach that we can use for targeting and alignment back to what we're doing. So it's very valuable to us. And then ultimately, we can make strategies and investments based on fact that everybody's behind. And so, again, for us, it's all about evidence and delivering to you what you need in order to get the team on board and inspire people to participate in becoming more customer focused. And this will ultimately have a significant influence on your culture, your business. So, again, our whole focus is to help you understand or have a continuous understanding of your customer's consciousness, if you will. We really want to know where everybody's head is at any moment in time so that we can become more relevant and engage with them. And everything that we do is based on that premise. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call. We'd love to have a conversation with you related to this. Or if you just want to have a conversation about technology in general, we'd be happy to have that conversation with you as well. Please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Have a great day.